coming on. He's a former FBI profiler. He was the founder of the Forensic Linguistic Studies at the FBI, host of the Cold Red podcast, which you can see the logo behind him. I really like your logo, by the way, Jim. And also author of the books A Journey to the Center of the Mind. And it's a privilege to have you on the show, Jim, just because the phase that we're at now, I've been thinking a lot about who this person is, who's responsible for the Nancy Guthrie disappearance, but also what they're like right now, like trying to get into the mind of someone who has essentially gotten away with this for now. Like what are they doing? What are they acting like? I'm curious what your profile is on this person.
Well, again, Brian, thanks for having me on the pod again. I do appreciate it. Yeah, and just a little bit of background in the profiling unit. I was there. My first case as a profiler was Unabomb, and I got sent out to San Francisco supposedly for 30 days, and I helped rewrite the profile that John Douglas did because the manifesto would come out, and that was a valuable tool that we put out there for people. And in my days in the profiling unit, when 9/11 happened, I mean, the pilots were all killed, of course, but we're still putting behavioral characteristics out there of, who were their adjacents, who was helping them. And certainly in order here, the anthrax case, DC sniper case, we put profiles out there, a bunch of little cases, for individual cities of serial rapists and killers. I'm surprised I don't see this from my former unit right now. I'm surprised it's not out there. So my Cold Red co-host podcast, Ray Carr and I, and he wasn't going to be here with us today, but he has some family issues he's handling. We put this together over the last few days. And let me go back again. I like to deal with an historical perspective. The Brown University shooting in December, Ray and I came up with a profile because no one else was putting anything out. And we were just about to go on our podcast. That was, I think, Thursday afternoon, late afternoon, and everything broke in the case. The guy was identified up in a security building of some sort, storage building, and it was resolved that night. But it turns out the profile we put together was pretty much right on the money. So yeah, that's what we like to do here. And I have a lot of experts have been out there, and me a little bit. What does the DNA mean in the camera? 41 minutes, this differential. That's all important stuff that the investigators are certainly discussing. But what Ray and I always like to say, a week after a big case like this, we need to get the public involved in this. What for them to look out for. And the video is great. Anybody, you recognize it, the mask, the backpack, the silly sort of gun holster that I was not familiar with, shoes, boots, anything like that. But there's also behavioral characteristics, and that's what Ray and I decided to put out because that's what we did back in the profiling unit for the whole 12 years I was there, from the mid 90s to the 2007 when I retired. So without any further ado, we broke it into two categories for this case. Again, the abduction of Nancy Guthrie, and I'm just calling it an abduction. And I know Ray agrees with me and everything we put together here. And it was either for revenge purposes, and there's multiple categories of that. Is it possible it's a for-profit kidnapping? They're the rarest of the rare in this country. Lindbergh baby, a couple in the early 90s, Frank Sinatra Jr. in the early 60s. If this was a successful abduction, whether you look at the guy's jittery behavior at the Nest camera, whatever, he still got away with it. As you said early on, it's been successful. If his attempt or their attempt was to do a for-profit kidnapping, they've done a poor job at that. And I believe at least some, if not all, of the ransom demands coming into TMZ, whomever, they're opportunists. They're coming out of they're the Nigerian prince people out of Africa. They're Eastern European scammers, or somewhere in the U.S. Who knows? But if this abduction successful, to summarize the crime itself, kidnapping not successful because there's no proof of life. Every kidnapper knows you have to send some sort of proof of life, and where a watch may have been sitting in a bedroom somewhere, that's not enough. You still have to show your kidnappee is alive. So when we do these types of behavioral characteristics, it's not really a profile, we say. It's what we break it down is to pre-offense behavior, post-offense behavior. And what I tell people in this case, look at the video, look at the size, the shape, clothing, all the things we discussed already, and then take in these characteristics, which are proven over time, and we've had a very good percentage rate with, going back 25 years, John Douglas and wrestler Bob Wrestler and people like that before I was in the unit, and these are what these people do. We've interviewed serial offenders in prison, and we know this is how they behave, and we've interviewed them afterwards, even other type during interviews and interrogations when they're first arrested, and they gave us this stuff. So let's start with pre-offense behavior. Now the kidnapping was the early morning of Sunday morning, February 2nd. So this is going to be the week before, but again, it could be extended longer, shorter. If you've lived with someone, a neighbor, a son, a colleague, coworker, whatever category, here are some features you're going to see about this person before the crime. Unusually distracted and aloof, inordinately busy, but for unclear reasons, self-absorbed, more internet time than usual. And if you happen to see some of the things he's looked up, they would be unusual factors, maybe about Savannah Guthrie, maybe about kidnappings, etc. Purchases of odd materials, and we've seen the video, we know what some of those are. Perhaps financial issues, real or imagined, but again, I'm not sure this is a for-profit motivation here, so just keep that as a possibility. He would possess some sort of a abduction kit, and I put that in quotation marks in my notes, much like the backpack scene in the video. And again, serial rapists have rape kits, serial killers have kill kits. This would be an abduction kit, and you can imagine some of the common sense things in there, but you wouldn't just see a person carrying a bag with these kind of things in it every day. And they would include, it could be in a box, in a bowling bag. I think BTK, Dennis Rader, had it in some sort of a bowling bag, all these types of items. But obviously tape of different varieties, duct tape, electrical tape, masks, restraints of some sort, rope, wire, tools, that small flashlight, which is sort of distinctive, the bite light, I think they call it, and other items related to that. And lastly, again, pre-offense behavior. If you know maybe a little bit better than maybe others would, he's obsessed with one or more female celebrities and or high-profile women. So, of course, one of them would be Savannah Guthrie, but sometimes if there's any kind of a stalking element to this, he could have other women out there that he was fascinated or obsessed upon. But for some reason, because maybe Savannah Guthrie herself wasn't available, her mother was, and he has a familiarity with the Tucson, Arizona area. So, Ron, I can hold off there on pre-offense behavior. I'm going to go into post-offense next, but do you have any questions about what I just said?
So when you said upset, so do you think it's someone who was motivated maybe by an obsession with Savannah?
I'm certainly not ruling that out. When I was in New York as an FBI agent, I had a close connection with the head of security of NBC. About 4 times a year, he'd contact me. Hey, another one of our female journalists or celebrities, whatever, TV people is being harassed by this guy. Can you check it out? And it was outside of New York. He would have handled it with the NYPD. He was retired NYPD. But since there are other parts of the country, maybe I would interview them if they're somewhere in the New York area, but I'd also send leads out. So a lot of female people on TV, a lot of females on TV. And it's different with actors, Brian. Actors look at their fellow actors when they're doing their scenes or their portrayals on TV. The difference with people like Savannah Guthrie and others is they look into the camera. And you get these people that maybe suffer from a condition known as erotomania. And it's in the diagnostic statistical manual that psychologists use for all the different categories. It's basically like a stalker's disease. And it can be men or women, and they're hung up on usually people in power, celebrities, and they think there's a mutual love back and forth. And
Mm.
that's why I'm hoping early on the investigators went into every email Savannah has ever received, probably going back 5 years, from some fan who just repeats himself, but somehow it just was never fulfilled. Maybe she sent the 8 by 10 glossy or whatever the equivalent is today, and but that just wasn't enough for him. So I am not locking into this theory. And like I always say about these types of characteristics, I'll remind your audience, not every single one will be 100% right on the money. No profile is 100% perfect. But if the majority of these characteristics are met, and again, looking at the video, some kind of a Tucson connection over the years, current, in the past, consider calling the tip line. If the majority of these characteristics are met, and again, looking at the video, some kind of a Tucson connection over the years, current, in the past, consider calling the tip line. So yeah, the whole thing with Savannah just can't be ruled out. She is and like I said on the first interview I did, I think, yeah, the day after the kidnapping, victimology is what's very important about any type of violent crime committed against a person. And that's a behavioral term for, it's one thing knowing everything about the killer, the kidnapper, the rapist, whatever, but we want to know about the victim, high risk victim, low risk victim, all those things. And as it turns out, it's not just, in this case, Nancy Guthrie herself, it would be her extended family. And I'm
Mm.
not talking about them being involved in this crime. Others are looking into that. It may or may not be. The sheriff has since ruled them out. We'll leave that where it is. But certainly the connections to those people. And Savannah being the celebrity, the high profile person, certainly worth a lot of money. If there is a financial aspect to this, she has to be considered in terms of who are the people that have been reaching out to her over multiple years. And I'm sure every one of those persons, their criminal records, and maybe even some of them have been interviewed, or at least try to locate them, has been done by the investigators now working the case.
Yeah, just before we move on, it's interesting. I hadn't thought about that, them going through all of her emails. That would make sense. Because she probably has a lot from fans and maybe even creepy people. But I thought of something else when you were just saying that. In her last video that she did, she seemed like she was almost trying to like give the kidnapper sympathy, like almost she was like trying, almost like we, feel for you, you can still turn this around, almost like she was talking to someone who was obsessed with her, like trying to appeal to that person. That was kind of the sense I got when I first watched it, which seems to sort of go back to your theory here. And maybe the FBI told her to do that.
Yeah, and there's no doubt the FBI, the behavioralists are involved in not putting words in her mouth or on paper for her, but certainly guiding them and advising what to say and maybe what to stay away from. So yeah, there was definitely a shift in her tone and even her agency, so to speak, but to whom she was speaking over the course of the several videos she put out there. And I think you're right there. And of course, as I pointed out, and I guess others did too, but it's certainly the first video, they wanted to humanize her. That's very important in these types of abduction situations. Call her by her name, mom, mommy. I think only Nancy only once, mom, mommy, versions of that. So that was very important. They did. So they're trying to appeal to different levels and layers of whoever may be holding her, that, she is a real person, a human. She's kind. She's nice. I'm still baffled, and I find it very interesting. I wish I was the one that come up with this, but the fact that Savannah quoted lines from the movie Silence of the Lambs. I found
Yeah.
that very, very interesting. I'm not going to put a whole lot of interpretation in that. Maybe subconscious, maybe not. You'd think someone would have picked up on that. I know in the John Benet Ramsey murder, it never was a kidnapping, but for the first 6 hours or so, with the letter that was received, it was treated as such. In that letter, there were direct references to the movie Dirty Harry and the movie Speed, and I'm one of the first persons to pick up on that. And that was early in the internet days, and even the movie Usual Suspects was kind of intimated throughout. So it's not unusual for killers, or we'll say alleged kidnappers, to borrow from the media, sort of life imitating art. But it's unusual when in this case family members are borrowing from art, so
Yeah.
to speak. Not bad or not good. I'm not even saying that, but they chose those words. I would think not coincidentally in the long run.
Yeah, I just felt like maybe she was trying to appeal to someone who may
Sure,
be
she
obsessed with
was.
her. Which goes back to your theory of, it could be like a crazy fan.
Yeah, and look, a lot of your listeners may be young and they may barely remember President Reagan, although, or even the assassination attempt on him in 1981. And that was by a guy named John Hinckley, who was obsessed with the young actress Jodie Foster. And this is before actors and actresses would be putting their political, stuff out there. And I don't think anyone even knew her politics back then, and maybe even now, I don't know. But stalkers, people suffering from erotomania, will do really strange things. Sometimes they do hurt their actual victims. The actress, I forget her name, but she was in the show, in a mid 80s show, and she was murdered by her stalker. Yeah, so the bottom line is these things do happen. And I'm, as a part of me hoping that maybe this is an obsessed fan and he never could get to Savannah and he thinks he has some sort of a connection to her. So he just wants to keep her mother in a room somewhere and have these ongoing discussions with her about Savannah when she was young. And is there any chance she would like me? I know this is way out there in terms of a theory, but I look at the Elizabeth Smart kidnapping in Utah back in the early 2000s. Again, that was sex oriented, not related to this type of an abduction, but that person just wanted to keep that young woman in his possession, more or less, and keep her alive to fulfill, the ongoing fantasy he had about her. And he was doing very bad things to her. I'm not suggesting if that's the case here, it's happening to Mrs. Guthrie, but there are people out there whose brain synapses don't connect like ours do, and your audience, and then something like this, if they can't get Savannah, maybe this is the closest they can get. So I'm hoping for this sort of possibility, which would mean then maybe Mrs. Guthrie is still alive, but we just don't know, of course.
So let's move on now. So we were talking about what this person may have been acting like before the I guess abduction, we'll call it. Tell me now, what should people be looking for in the after?
Sure. And I actually, Ray and I, my again, Cold Red co-host Ray Carr and I broke this post-offense behavior into two parts. And one of it's pre-video release. So again, after the abduction, but like that first week before the video came out, and then after the video. So this is the post-offense behavior after the abduction, but before the video came out. And it's basically just a few bullet points here, but altered behavioral activity, especially the weekend of January 30th through February 1st. After that, this person's schedule is modified. He's more often in one place or less often in one place. Missing work, missing family functions, odd late night hours, out of town or claims to be for unclear reasons, and perhaps driving a rental car, but for no apparent reason. Obviously, observable mental strain, sleep disruption, potential for increased substance use, alcohol or drugs, over explaining whereabouts or created unsolicited alibis, hypervigilance toward police presence, cleaning vehicle interior or interiors repeatedly, disposing of bags, gloves, or clothing, deep cleaning of residence garage, burning or discarding digital devices, storage, media. So again, all the serial offenders we've talked to over the years, at least some of these categories are what they engage after they commit a crime, especially one that goes high profile and is and there's a lot of media coverage. And let me just swing right into the post-offense behavior after the video was released. So take into account everything I've already mentioned, but now I don't think he suspected this, whether he had inside information somehow, some way that the Nest camera did not have a subscription. This may have thrown off, his thought process a bit. So now the video comes out, pretty clear of what he's wearing anyway, and he becomes even more frenetic, nervous, unstable, highly irritable, moving around physically, and even much more so than the past week. Possibly changes appearance, cuts hair, mustache, grows facial hair, and following the media even more obsessively. Frequent searches online of case updates or suspect descriptions, no doubt following the media. No doubt, Brian, listening to you both on television and digitally and on your pod as we talking right here, monitoring all different Facebook and social media groups, possibly calling tip lines with false or misleading information and posting speculative theories online, and possibly discussing the case excessively to gauge reactions of other people. Um, you know, so again, some of these may be right on the money. Some of it, once or twice he did this. One or two may not be applicable at all. But as I'm telling, with everything I just sort of mentioned here, if you know someone out there in any category of your life that fits at least, three quarters, the majority of these types of indicators, call the FBI tip line. If nothing else, you're going to get, and it's right, you're going to get $200,000. And if it's wrong, that's okay.
Now, what should people be looking for in the after?
Sure. And Ray and I, my again, Cold Red co-host Ray Carr and I broke this post-offense behavior into two parts. And one of it's pre-video release. So again, after the abduction, but like that first week before the video came out, and then after the video. So this is the post-offense behavior after the abduction, but before the video came out. And it's basically just a few bullet points here, but altered behavioral activity, especially the weekend of January 30th through February 1st. After that, this person's schedule is modified. He's more often in one place or less often in one place. Missing work, missing family functions, odd late night hours, out of town or claims to be for unclear reasons, and perhaps driving a rental car, but for no apparent reason. Obviously, observable mental strain, sleep disruption, potential for increased substance use, alcohol or drugs, over-explaining whereabouts or created unsolicited alibis, hypervigilance toward police presence, cleaning vehicle interior or interiors repeatedly, disposing of bags, gloves, or clothing, deep cleaning of residence garage, burning or discarding digital devices, storage, media. So again, all the serial offenders we've talked to over the years, at least some of these categories are what they engage after they commit a crime, especially one that goes high profile and is and there's a lot of media coverage. And let me just swing right into the post-offense behavior after the video was released. So take into account everything I've already mentioned, but now I don't think he suspected this, whether he had inside information somehow, some way that the Nest camera did not have a subscription. This may have thrown off, his thought process a bit. So now the video comes out, pretty clear of what he's wearing anyway, and he becomes even more frenetic, nervous, unstable, highly irritable, moving around physically, and even much more so than the past week. Possibly changes appearance, cuts hair, mustache, grows facial hair, and following the media even more obsessively. Frequent searches online of case updates or suspect descriptions, no doubt following the media, no doubt, Brian, listening to you both on television and digitally and on your pod as we talking right here, monitoring all different Facebook and social media groups, possibly calling tip lines with false or misleading information and posting speculative theories online, and possibly discussing the case excessively to gauge reactions of other people. So again, some of these may be right on the money. Some of it, once or twice he did this. One or two may not be applicable at all. But as I'm telling, with everything I just sort of mentioned here, if you know someone out there in any category of your life that fits at least, three quarters, the majority of these types of indicators, call the FBI tip line. If nothing else, you're going to get, and it's right, you're going to get $200,000. And if it's wrong, that's okay. The FBI is used to getting well-intentioned tips along the way. When I got the Unabomb in the summer of '95, they had 2,500 suspects. And within 6 months or so, 7 months, they're now the one named Ted Kaczynski. But we had to rule out a lot of those other 2,500 that people were calling in. So call it in if these characteristics even resemble a little bit someone you may know. And I'll end this part, Brian, and we can go into some more Q&A. But people talk about the lone wolf offender. And I really think in terms of violent criminals out there, Ted Kaczynski / the Unabomber was really the last lone wolf criminal, because nowadays everybody is online, some much more than others. So even if you're a loner, kind of living on your own and you're isolated from people, you're not that lone wolf because you're engaging and interacting with others online, maybe even the dark web, and getting reinforced or learning, or somehow just being supported by these types of sites and information. So so yeah, even if this guy, if someone was kind of a loner, but now they're really a loner, you haven't seen them for like 3 whole weeks, that's a clue. And everything else I said matches up. That's something you may want to then call the tip line and let the FBI know.
So a lot of people have been describing this guy as an amateur just based on the holster and sort of the way he operated and trying to cover the camera with the shrubbery at first. But I mean, he's gotten away with it for this long, despite all of the resources and all of, the federal government and the sheriff's office looking for him. Do you think could there be a cockiness about him? Like, what do you think is going through his mind in that regard? Do they get more like, oh, they're never going to find me sort of vibe, or is it more like trying to hide more?
Well, again, I like, I'm a history buff and I'm a student of history, certainly criminal justice history. Let me take everyone back to 1996, the Olympic bombings, and I had nothing to do with the Richard Jewell part of it. I was a brand new profiler, still working Unabomb. But within the next year and a half, finally a guy named Eric Rudolph was identified because there was a few more bombings, including in Birmingham, the abortion clinic, in which an off-duty police officer was killed, a nurse severely injured. We knew within an hour or so Eric Rudolph was our suspect. So we had a name. We knew he was from Western North Carolina. I visited that area 3 separate times for a week each time, trying to put the profile together, talk to locals who may have known him, help the investigators. It took 5 years to catch that guy. So did Eric Rudolph? Did he get a little bit cocky after a while? Maybe. The Unabomber was pretty successful for about 10 different bombings, and then the composite went out in 1987. The famous one with the aviator sunglasses, the hoodie. You can argue didn't even look that much like him, but he then went dark for 6 years, and that was really the first and only clue law enforcement had before I was even involved in the case of who is this Unabomber person. Well, someone saw him outside the computer store, and that's the composite sketch they gave to a police artist. So you can argue this person's overall demeanor and persona and personality would determine whether he's the cocky type right now or he's the nervous Nelly type, just to use two kind of unofficial terms here. I just can't profess that. I can tell you this, he's being very careful. And if not doing everything I just mentioned post offense, he's doing a lot of them to cover his tracks. No criminal wants to get caught. Sometimes, oh, the guy really wanted to get arrested. Unabomber wrote these letters to New York Times, whatever, because he wanted to get arrested. No, no one wants to go to prison for the rest of their life. So this guy doesn't want to get caught, and he's being very careful, and he's retracing some steps to perhaps cover his tracks, whether like the Idaho killer of the 4 students going actually driving down the street again, checking things out. Who knows about that? That'd be pretty high risk on the street, relatively small, or I should say, not that well traveled from what I've seen. But he's in obsessively following the media, and he's just making some strange, furtive actions that he wouldn't have been doing up to 3 weeks ago. And that's what we're asking people to look for and recognize. Male, probably 30-ish or above. And we're not ruling out a second person, by the way. But when we give a profile like this, we focus on the main, we'll call them alpha male, but certainly the primary person behind it. And it could be a secondary person involved, and who knows, even a third. But the odds are that the profile or the behavioral characteristics I just put out will mostly align with the person who is in charge of this, whose idea this was, and is basically running the show at this point in time.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say about the street because I've kind of wondered that, like, it's creepy, but like, is it possible that, when we've been out there, he's like driven by or something like that? A lot of people are hung up now, when we're recording this, it's day 21. And you mentioned how long other cases have taken to be solved. There was one new report out today from ABC saying that they may scale back resources the longer this goes unsolved. Are you concerned at all? Like, could this just doesn't seem like a cold case now, but do you have concerns about that?
No, if there's any scaling back, we're talking months down the line. And let's hope there's no other incident anywhere in the country that would then draw people off of this case that, of some sort of large, and serious consequence. So there's not going to be a scaling down anytime soon. I would even say for the next month or two, they may be bringing, certainly the FBI, maybe bringing more people and maybe relieving others. That's how the Unabomb task force worked. There really was no task force until 1994 when the Unabomber came back with a vengeance and killed two people, one in 94, one in 95. And the task force has been put together after he came back. The Unabomber came back with a vengeance and killed two people, one in 94, one in 95. And the task force has been put together after he came back. And we were rotating people in and out all the time. I was supposed to only be there 30 days as a brand new profiler, but they kind of liked what I was adding to it, and they kept me on board for the whole time. So yeah, and there's going to be some people that stay there long term, other people in and out. I don't think there's any scaling down of this. This is too important, too high profile to the sheriff's department, as well as other local and federal agencies. So no, they want to get this accomplished. They want to get this. They need to get something. I'm hoping it's not just finding Mrs. Guthrie somewhere, and we'll just leave it at that. No more graphic, but that would be, of course, give us some extra clues. But I still want to remain optimistic here and think this is not just a body recovery, but this is also a rescue of Mrs. Guthrie. That for whatever reason, this person's keeping her alive and engaging with her at least somehow for whatever psychologically oriented reasons he is doing so. But it's going to be months before people start getting pulled away. And even then, if another lead comes up, which they'll bring people back in like, 24 hours notice, and they'll pick up where they left off.
Do you think there's a chance that this is someone really close to Mrs. Guthrie? I don't know. I know they've ruled out the family. I mean, we did, like you said, we just kind of have to accept the sheriff at his word, even though apparently it's unusual for them to do that during such an active investigation when there's no suspect. But could it could it be someone close that they're just overlooking, like someone else close? Because isn't that normally the case, like statistically?
Yeah, and along with being a profiler, I'm a forensic linguist and I have a master's in linguistics. So when you even said really close, well, let's define really, let's define close. So all logical definitions we would need here. Yes, it is very likely. And you've talked about it before, and others that have been on the air, the concentric circles that go around, 80 to 85% of homicides are committed by someone known to the victim. That statistic's been around for hundreds of years, going back to Cain and Abel, if you want to go the Bible route. His brother killed him. So so they have to look at everyone there. They have to rule them out. I'm not a big fan of publicly ruling people out. I think the sheriff, I would have been more comfortable saying we're no longer focusing on the Guthrie family, but everyone is still considered a potential suspect as the investigation continues. The sheriff came along and I guess completely ruled them out. And that's fine. They're on the inside. I'm on the outside. They know a lot more than I do. So, but to get to the gist of your question, Brian, yes, this could be someone a little close, really close, adjacently close to Mrs. Guthrie, or certainly the family. Yes, and I mean there are all kinds of what really all of us could be conceivably victims of a loved one being abducted. Not all of us are multimillionaires like Savannah Guthrie. And even if the abductor never really wanted the money, or that was just like a way down the list, oh, if I get, a couple 100,000 for this, that would be great. Um, it was, there may have been some level of jealousy there that, I don't believe, Savannah was no different than me growing up. And, why did she get, so lucky and make all this money? I'm just trying to think of cases I've known in the past when some people, were I was a police officer in Ben Salem Township, suburban Philadelphia, started in '76, young guy right out of college. And right before I got on there was the famous Apt family mass murder, ABT. And I didn't work that case. It was like 6 months before I was hired. And here are six family members, well, actually five family members, one of the girls' boyfriends, teenage girl, and the dog, all killed in the house by gunshot. And there was big headlines in the Philly area before I was even on that department. Who the heck would do something like this? And it turns out the investigation within a few days to a week pointed to a neighbor across down the next block. And here, two of the brothers, and they weren't even the ones killed. They were out that day. They used to tease this kid when he was a youngster, and bully him stuff. Right or wrong, we can discuss that. And this guy, after all these years, said, "I'm taking them out." Killed the family. Now, of course, I'm not saying Savannah was a bully to someone, but there could have been something in their personality that just said, from 20 years ago. Look at the Brown murder, and like I said, our profile, our behavioral characteristics that Ray Carr and I put together were pretty close. And we said this guy has a grievance with Brown and maybe others going back months or a few years. I wish I said a quarter of a century, but that's how long people have these grievances they hold. They foment for years. And then in the Brown shooter case, a quarter of a century, even longer with the MIT professor he ultimately killed, going back to Portugal. I think that would have been like 30 years. So victimology, it comes back to that word, which is really the direct answer to your question. Everyone around that person has to have around Nancy Guthrie has to have their own concentric circle, and then everyone and those people's families' lives and other lives, have to be checked out and interviewed. Criminal records, psychological issues. Well, he's always been obsessed on Savannah. He never misses one of her shows, and that person would have to be focused on. And where were they the night of February 2nd? Phone activity, and take it from there.
Yeah, I never thought as much about this until you started explaining it, how much work they must be doing behind the scenes in terms of digging into Savannah's history. I mean, you mentioned even like people from decades ago who might have a grudge
Sure.
against her. I mean, are they're actually I mean, are they just talking to Savannah? Hey, is there someone from when you were in college that hated you? I mean, do they go that deep?
And see, it's much easier with quote unquote normal people that aren't in the media. It just keep it to her different stages of life, that victim's family member will say, but you don't have millions of people watching you on TV. So they have to do exactly what we just sort of agreed upon. All her friends and family, sororities. I mean, who knows what they're going to look into? Certainly down the line. That's why that's probably the stage they are now, and that's why it's not going to be scaled back. At least I would think anytime soon. And I know they're doing their best on the ground there. And the only ones more frustrated than the family are the investigators. And we can talk about public and media people. I have, a couple toes in the door of the media here, and it is frustrating for me too. But no one more than the family, than of course the investigators, and probably some heads butting in there every once in a while. But the bottom line is they're going to check out every single lead they can and get over any personality issues therein, and get this thing done. So that's why you see sometimes late night searches. And why would they be out there at 2 a.m. looking for stuff? And well, maybe because a new shift came in at midnight, working around the clock, and they decided to maybe they have better luck with reflecting type materials that time of night. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on, and it'll be going on, and every single person, as time goes on, that was in contact with the Guthrie family, and not just Savannah. She's obviously the one we all know from her NBC career. But let's look at people that may know the sister and the brother, and gosh, who even knew that the father died? I think decades ago.
Yeah.
Did he have any enemies? And did somehow someone keep a grudge this long? And maybe it's the son of the person with the grudge. And these are all the things they have to look at. And just look for that person then who has the activity I just described, pre-offense, post-offense. And that's going to help put everything together too, along with whatever the alleged grievance was. And I use alleged, we say grievance here. You and me, it may not bother us if someone, said something or looked a certain way, but other people can hold on to this for years and years and years, especially if they see someone get successful in one way or the other. And then it finally, for whatever reason, it just breaks, and they do something like this. So this has to be looked at. I mean, and I'll just, as we're kind of winding down here, could it be some kind of a rando, as the Youngs would say, and just not just cruising down the street that night? Obviously, some pre-planning and preparation, mission oriented, but you know that would be an outlier. It would violate basically every sort of prior abduction of which we are aware in this country. But you got to look at that stuff too, and that's hopefully where phone records, DNA, things like that will come about.
When we talk about someone obsessed with Savannah and maybe a stalker, do you think they're focusing on someone from Arizona? Because there has kind of been this sense on the ground, and the sheriff has sort of, he hasn't said it outright, but there's been this feeling that the person could be from around here.
The stalking victim from the mid 80s, the young actress was Rebecca Schaefer on a show called My Sister Sam. I think Pam Dauber was her co-star, and just a bizarre stalker following her and came to her door with flowers one day and then just wound up, killing her when she basically shut the door on him. So to go back now to this case, yeah. Look, in the late '90s, I became friends with the TV lawyer pundit Ann Coulter because she was a victim of a stalker, and was a really strange guy who just wouldn't leave her alone. He knew enough not to quite break the law, but the FBI interviewed him. He didn't stop. We came up with these different plans and ploys to help her. So I actually went and interviewed. I didn't interview him because he was very standoffish when agents knocked on his door and his wife was there. I don't know what you're talking about. I have First Amendment rights, etc. So I planned to meet in Washington, D.C. on a day off. I said, hey, I'm friends with Ann, and I just want to talk. You're kind of her stalker. I'm not a stalker. And it was just interesting having one-on-one relationship with this guy. There's a chapter in my fourth book about this case. I don't name him, but it just, I know what some of these, especially women celebrities, go through and I've been on with Megyn Kelly a good bit the last 2 weeks. She's had her own problems. Guy in jail right now who's stalking her, and it's not easy, especially when you have kids, etc. So, so Brian, to answer your question, it's any and all of these categories. And again, I'm not locked into this theory. I want to be careful here. Again, I'm on the outside, like the rest of us are. You're more on the inside than I am, no doubt, right there on the ground. But I'm just basing everything I say on my experience in these types of cases in the past, and I've certainly kept up with them since I retired a number of years ago. So yeah, they have to look at these people, and it's the rarest of the rare that a stalker would just do something like this with no leakage beforehand or no, we'll call it pre-offense behavior, but certainly even long-term behavior in which an email, can you send me a picture? Can you mention my name on the, pull your ear and you're thinking of me at the top of the hour. I've seen cases like this, like with local weather women over the years, things like that. And these guys just become obsessed because they're looking right into the camera. Oh, she's talking to me today. And they would, in the old days, videotape them. I'm sure, DVR, whatever they do now, rewatch it over and over. And oh, she's talking to me. Oh, I know when she said that word, she was talking about me. And oh, she wore blue today on that dress is blue. And these are all signals. And they also have, and I'll tell you what else this person has. If it's this type of a stalking, obsessive type person, clearly suffering from erotomania, they have a shrine. They have a shrine set up to her in a closet that maybe no one else has access to. Could be like a big trunk, like a steamer trunk they keep in the basement of the garage. A number of locks on it. They open up and there's pictures and there's maybe souvenirs. There's who knows what else they would have. I don't know NBC. I don't watch any of the morning shows on the networks, but does she come outside, of the studio and talk to people with her mic? I'm not sure how that works. Was he one of the people talking to her on his mic,
Mm.
months ago, years ago, and he has that on videotape. He's, blown up every frame. Now it's not even videotape, but, recorded material. And that's the little shrine they have to this person. So I'm not saying this is an obsessed stalker who took Mrs. Guthrie. Obviously, his goal, you think, would be to take Savannah, but perhaps she's so well protected where she lives and when she travels, whatever, and he didn't want to mess with kids. So, hey, her mother's all over the news with Savannah on, different episodes of the show. Let me go with her, and it's the next best thing. And if that's the case, let's just hope it's a respectful thing that I really like your daughter. I love your daughter. I just want to talk about her, and hopefully she can just answer the questions he wants in a way to survive and go from there. Or she could have been put in a ditch an hour after the
Mm.
abduction.
Yeah.
So and it's still going to have been all those other categories I just mentioned: obsessive stalker. Something happened to Mrs. Guthrie, and now she's out, somewhere where she hasn't been found yet. So these are what the agents are looking for. They're not downsizing yet. They're going to be working out these circles. I'm holding my arms out if you're not watching, as far as you can go to cover every one of these leads, and you'd be surprised how something else comes up. And let's go check this guy out. Boy, he's only been to Tucson, 2 or 3 times in the last few years, but he used to live here, or he had a job here 5 years ago, and then all of a sudden other things come up. Luckily, maybe DNA, fingerprints, something like that, cell tower pings, but maybe someone they can talk to and say, boy, that behavioral characteristics, pre-offense, post-offense behavior. Yeah, by the way, he was acting exactly like that. Then they have a suspect to focus on. Then they can start getting direct evidence from him and hopefully make that arrest and hopefully rescue, I should say, Mrs.